Hello, this is Mike from The Intuitive Lens, and welcome to the three-part study, of which this is the second part, dealing with noise reduction of this image and masking of that noise reduction to retain texture in the background of the image. And if we zoom in here, you can see that this image does have some luminance and chrominance noise. It was shot on a D300 at 800 ASA, and particularly in the sides of the cars you can see the typical kind of D300 noise. Shot at f11, so needed the extra ISO rating. The way I do this kind of work is I make another layer, so duplicating the background layer and just renaming this the noise reduction layer, because we're going to mask away the noise reduction in the background of the image to keep the texture in the gravel and the grass and the track. So I'm just invoking Noiseware Professional here on that new layer. And you can see that there's a default noise reduction. As I'm moving around, of course, as I press the mouse and move the hand around, it turns the noise reduction off. And as I let go, you can see the noise reduction snap into play. And around the helmet inside the car, you can see it's significantly reduced. And here you have a number of parameters you can change for the noise level in the image and the noise reduction applied to that noise level. So you can move these sliders manually and see the result, but I quite like to have a kind of bracketing of luminance noise reduction using this technique here, and that builds me a series of images that show the before and after for different strengths of noise reduction at the luminance level. And you can see that if you pick around the average, it's quite a good effect. If you pick high luminance reduction, it smooths everything out and gives it a kind of plasticky feel if you go too far. If you don't do enough, then you still have residual noise in the image. You also have to keep a close eye on sharpening and contrast applied to the noise reduced image, because you're trying to get back to at least the original detail, sharpness and contrast in the image after the noise reduction technique has been applied. So here you can see I've increased the standard contrast to 15, although you can come from 0 all the way up to 20, and comparing the grille of the rear racer, you can see how contrast and sharpness is being affected. As I grip the image and let go, you can see the difference between the original and the affected image down here. And there are good points to check, because as you increase contrast, of course, you might lose a little bit of shadow detail. So it's a balance. And checking here the shadow detail underneath the cars is a good guide. You'll notice that there is some reduction in color saturation as well. That's something you have to be careful of. You can pick that back up again later in final editing. Now what we're going to do is look quite carefully at how to retain the background textures in the track, for example. As you can see, there's quite a lot of smearing when the noise reduction is applied. As you switch between these layers of the background layer and the noise reduced layer, you can see how this texture, especially in the grass, is smeared in the noise reduced. That's the background layer. So what we're going to try and do is mask away using an adjustment mask by painting on the background through the noise reduced layer. So we paint a mask onto the upper noise reduced layer to reveal the background below. And here I'm just enlarging the brush I've selected, and the easiest way to see what you've done is to turn off the underlying background layer, so that as you paint over the top to create the mask, the lower layer will show through. But because you can't see the difference, it's good to just turn that lower layer off, and that reveals the transparency below, and you can see what you're doing. I have to say that the way in which this video is being made, the cursor is larger than it actually is when you're using it, so don't be fooled by that. So now we have a mask on the noise reduction layer, and if we turn both layers on, we can see we have the benefit of the noise reduction on the cars and the benefit of the texture in the background. So the final step in preparation before we go to monochrome is just to ensure that we have shadow and highlight detail well preserved, and that we're making the most use of the dynamic range here. So just reduce the highlights a little bit, maybe 10 points to get them off of background white, and bring the blacks up to slightly improve the contrast in the shadows. So that gives the image a little bit more punch, and you can see that underneath the bumpers here at the front of the cars, but it's still preserving enough shadow detail in the places where we want it retained. And I can just nudge the gamma of the overall image by using this midpoint slider to compensate for any reduction in brightness by lifting the blacks and dulling the highlights to get them under control again. So here we have a good balance between whites at the one end and good shadow detail at the other. Perfect position to save this to prepare for the next step, which is taking the best image we can through into the monochrome conversion stage. And that's about it. Don't forget to review the third part of this study to follow through into monochrome.